Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our session. We're here to talk about understanding performance and adoption on the Salesforce platform using event monitoring. So, quick introductions. I'm Amanda Grady. I am the product manager for event monitoring. And I actually have a guest speaker here with me today, who's Heiko from New Relic, which is a company that specializes in application performance management, and they have integrated with event monitoring. So I am obliged to show the statement. I'm sure you've seen it a few times over the last couple of days. But I am going to be talking about some of the roadmap functionality coming in my product today. So I will try to call that out pretty clearly when that is the case. And just a reminder that we do recommend you make your purchasing decisions based on existing functionality. So I'm going to give a quick intro to the product, first of all. Just quick show of hands. How many of you are familiar with event monitoring already? OK, good mix. Any of you already customers or using event monitoring? I realize they may be two different things. OK, good. So just one, looks like so far, maybe one or two. And then how many of you are familiar with New Relic or New Relic Insights? OK, so it looks like there should be some relevant material that's new to a lot of you here. And then we're going to show both event monitoring, the raw API, and show the integration, as well as at the end, so time allowing, I will talk a little bit to roadmap. So why the need for event monitoring? Well, you're all developers. You know that many of our customers are doing lots of development and customizations on the Salesforce platform. And a lot of customers have questions around, well, what are my users actually doing on the platform? How do I know if I'm getting value for my investment? How do I know the platform is being leveraged the way I want it to be? How do I support my users? And really, a great answer to that is the event monitoring product. So event monitoring is an add-on to the Salesforce platform. It is sold as a standalone product, or it is sold as part of a package called Shield, which is really kind of a security package, which is a bundle with another two products called Platform Encryption and Field Audit Trail. But event monitoring has lots of value standalone. So I'd say first use case is, a lot of my customers do buy it for the security visibility, knowing what users are doing on the platform, knowing what data they're exporting, and so on. But two equally useful use cases are around adoption and performance, and we're going to talk a bit more to those two today. So adoption, with event monitoring, you get visibility into all the events that are happening on your platform. What pages are users going to visit? Who's logging in from where? Where are the performance hotspots? Where are the pages that are running slowest? So we were told not to spend too much time on slides. I'm going to try to move through a couple of slides very quickly before moving into demo. But just a little bit about the history of this product. So the first generation architecture is really based primarily on logs. And some of the key characteristics here, these logs were logs that we're already doing for ourselves internally. But we had customers that were, on occasion, asking for these logs and wanted this visibility for themselves and actually to have it on an ongoing basis. So what we're doing is that we're actually copying over the logs, running a MapReduce job, and then surfacing them up in an API on a per-org basis. So for each event that we are tracking, you'll have a file per day. And we also have a pilot for hourly events. So if you're interested in that, do feel free to contact me. I'll include contact information afterwards. So these are downloaded CSV or comma-separated value files. Some of the key characteristics, because they're logs, by their very nature, they don't contain any customer data in them. So they'll have Salesforce IDs instead of report names and so on. So typically, you will want to denormalize this data into whatever system that you're integrating the log files into. As part of this architecture, we also do provide one optional way to integrate the data, which is a Salesforce Einstein Analytics app, or you may know that by Wave. It's recently rebranded. And that is just one way that you can actually use to visualize the data. So in terms of the events that we actually cover, we've expanded a lot since the product was first launched a couple of years ago. So I think we started out with about 25 events. We're now up to 41 events. So these cover activities like where users are logging in from, where they're logging out, What reports are they looking at? What dashboards are they looking at? In terms of performance, you can look at visual force. There's a number of different events tracking Apex. In our spring release, we added 4 new Lightning log lines. So this is particularly useful if you're switching to Lightning and starting to develop on Lightning. You can track things like Lightning errors, Lightning page views, Lightning performance, and so on. And then looking a little bit ahead to our winter release, every release I'm trying to add some new events. So we've got some new events planned for winter, which include what users are searching for on the platform, what knowledge articles they're looking at, and then an event for our platform encryption feature around key management. So with that, let me move into demo. So I'm in the Salesforce workbench. So I'm just going to show you how you can query the event log file. So initially, I'm going to look at the SOCL interface. So this is probably the easiest way to query objects in Salesforce because it's pretty declarative. So you just choose the object that you're interested in. So in this case, I want to look at the event log file. So let me see how many files I have in this environment. So in this environment, I've had this on, so it's been tracking the events all along. So I've actually got over 2,000 files just for this little demo work. So even though there's not a lot of users in this organization, we're tracking lots of activity because we're really tracking everything that users are doing. So let me take a look now and see what the actual log looks like. So I'm just going to select all the other attributes apart from count. And in this particular interface, in the SOCL interface, this is what the log file looks like. So this is base64 encoded. So this is not super useful to show you what's actually in the log file. This is useful for certain integrations. So for example, if you're using Informatica or a tool like that to pull the data into something, that could be useful, but not good for looking at here. So let's switch over and look at the REST Explorer. So this one's a little bit more difficult to write a query in, but you'll see the results are a bit easier to interpret. So I just queried here. So I'm looking for event type. I'm querying these attributes, event type, log date, file length, and so on, from the event log file. And for now, I'm just going to choose one of my event types, one of those 41 event types, which is Lightning page view. Actually, I'm going to switch. I'm going to do Lightning performance. So let me have a look at this file and see what this looks like. So still a little bit raw looking. So the event type here is Lightning performance. But here, at least now, I can see my header names. I can see the various fields that are in this particular event. So some of the useful fields I would call out here. I know the user that triggered this event. I have a session key and login key. These are super useful because they enable me to tie all the activities that a user did in the particular session together. So across all those multiple events, I can know from end to end what a user's click path was. I can see things like what user agent they were on, what browser name they were using, and performance-related metrics. I can see what time they loaded this page, how long they stayed on this page. So starting to get a bit more useful, but still it's just raw data. So where the real power comes in is when you start to visualize the data. So I did mention that when you buy event monitoring, you do get an analytics app, or Wave app, as it used to be called. So I'm just going to show you this. We provide a kind of a starter pack of dashboards out of the box to give you some idea of what the data can look like. So let's take a look at in the app, we are actually integrating about 19 of our log lines. So not all the log lines are integrated into the app yet from the API, but some of them are. So let's take a look at, say, the Lightning adoption dashboard. So this is showing me what users are using Lightning Experience and which users are using the Salesforce One mobile app as well. So I did tell you this is a small demo environment. I only have 7 users actually using Lightning in here. But I can see how many pages they've been viewing. I can see where they've been accessing it from, like iPhone or from another browser. And then I can see which pages, which types of objects are they accessing the most, which specific objects have they accessed, which pages are visited the most, and then which pages users stay on the longest. So starting to get a lot more powerful here. And then similarly for other events, I have for API, for example, I can see which APIs have been used the most, how the API is performing, so a comparison of the DB time to the CPU time, which clients are accessing the API, which methods are being called. And then another one which I think is pretty useful is the the Apex executions dashboard, which is showing me which Apex classes are used the most, again, how is Apex performing for users, and then what are the Apex hotspots. So like, if I want to try and make some deductions from looking at this data here, so not surprisingly, in this demo environment, the most commonly used Apex class is the transaction security policy. And that's because transaction security is actually a feature in event monitoring, so not surprising we're testing it out a lot. But if I want to look at how is it performing, so here I can see it's actually some pretty good news. So transaction security, it is the top used Apex class, but in terms of the average of runtime, it's actually doing very well. It's not the slowest by any means. So in fact, the slowest one is an anti-malware scan down here. So that's good news for me because I know that transaction security is actually being really performant. So this is just one example. We do have customers that use their own custom visualizations. We also have integrations with a couple of key partners. So Splunk would be a good example. There is an app for Splunk, which is kind of a general purpose. Or for specific use cases, for security, for example, we have integrations with Fair Warning and CloudLock. And then for the performance use case, I would say our key integration is with New Relic, which is a specialist in application performance management. So with that, I'm going to pass over to Heiko, who's going to actually talk about his experience integrating with the event log files and give a demo of his integration.
Thanks, Amanda. All right, let's do a few slides. Do you have the slides open anywhere?
Yeah, sorry.
I mean, running? Or do you just... Thank you. All right, so first of all, a few words about me. In 2010, I started working for a company called Salesforce. Everybody knows it. Spent 4 years there. And then 2014, started working for New Relic, going a little bit more technical than I was at Salesforce. When coming to New Relic, I always was looking for a way to help monitor performance in a Salesforce environment, because I knew from my past at Salesforce that customers would ask me, how do we monitor the customizations that we make in Apex and Visualforce? And I never had a good answer. So fast forward a little bit, and New Relic introduces a new product, Salesforce introduces event monitoring, and I started thinking about an integration. Problem with event monitoring, not that there really is a problem, but the problem is that it's mainly API only. Yes, you can feed the data into Wave, but if you've ever done that or tried that seriously, you're going to notice that Wave has certain limitations. I'm not going to talk about those today, but scalability and also the number of events that you can get into Wave tend to be a big challenge. Another problem is if you don't look at Wave, event log files come as CSV files. If you wanted to see data about a rogue salesperson that might be stealing data from you through report exports, do you always know when exactly they did the report exports? Do you know for how long? So sifting through tons and tons of CSV files to figure that out and actually limit those to that one salesperson can be very challenging. Also, to figure out trends over time. probably if you have one file daily, or in the future, one file per hour, isn't a lot of fun. So what we were looking at is we need a schemaless database, and I'll talk more about that, that allows us to very easily run queries against it ad hoc to answer kind of that Salesforce, that sales rep question. We also want to dashboard data over time to see trends in adoption, in Visualforce performance, in Lightning performance, in things like how are my Apex classes doing. Schemaless database, mainly because Salesforce keeps changing how many event log files they have. They keep changing what attributes they actually publish through the event log files. And quite frankly, as somebody who maintains the solution, I don't want to go in every single time Salesforce adds a new field to a CSV file and modify the schema. So a schemaless database would be beneficial. New Relic happens to have that schemaless database with an analytics UI on top of it. So New Relic Insights solves that problem pretty much. I've been at this for about 2.5 years, had a few failed attempts at this. My very first attempt was to write this in 100% Apex. Now, there were two challenges. Number one, in my 4 years at Salesforce, guess how many lines of Apex I wrote? 0. The second challenge was once I actually started writing Apex, I ran it in my developer org. It ran totally fine. I then ran it in New Relic's Salesforce's org, and every morning I would come back to no data. I was trying to wonder what's going on. Any of you ever run into governor limits? Unhandleable exceptions? That's exactly what happened, because those event log files in a production org tend to get really, really big. And Apex is just not suited to handle that. And again, at some point, the governor kicks in and says, not going to do it. Second attempt, as you can see on the slide, was an open source Ruby app. In theory, that sounded very simple. You, as a Salesforce administrator or Salesforce developer, would install a Ruby app on a server, could be Heroku. Your Salesforce org would tell the Ruby app what to download. The Ruby app downloads it, puts it into Insights, and you're golden. I would assume that most of you are actually developers, but in my experience with Salesforce, most Salesforce admins aren't developers and don't necessarily come from a very technical background. So I was running into two challenges when trying to position that with Salesforce customers. Challenge one is, what is Ruby? Right? Most admins don't necessarily know what Ruby is. Challenge two is, that concept kind of broke the multi-tenant SaaS model of Salesforce. As a Salesforce customer, A, you don't want to, but B, you don't have to install a server somewhere that is running this Ruby app. So we threw out that approach. And the current solution is a Java app that's running on Heroku and is hosted by New Relic. Real quick, the architecture looks something like this. We have New Relic Insights, multi-tenant analytics product. Within that circle, you see your Salesforce org. There's an App Exchange package. We're working on getting that certified. Right now, I can share it with you as a private App Exchange package. An App Exchange package that checks continuously what new event log files are available, and then sends that information to that Java application that's running on Heroku. The Java application is downloading the event log files, kind of changes them up a little bit because Insights doesn't understand CSV. It only understands JSON. We add a little bit of information and then put that data into Insights. And whoops, I didn't know it would slide back through, but the solution then looks something like this. Amanda was saying earlier in the demo environment that she had, she didn't have a lot of users. Try me, because I'm demoing against a developer org, so 2 user maximum. The other challenge that I have, Amanda is probably working with an org that her developers log into on a day-to-day basis. Well, I can't make developers log into this stuff, so I'm using another New Relic product to actually generate traffic against this developer org. The product's called Synthetics. It's generating synthetic traffic, typically an SLA-type monitoring tool. So what do we see here? We see average Apex performance throughout the day. We see an adoption trend. Little comment on that. This is just looking at the number of events of a specific type in that org. We can see that the majority is URI events. This is my synthetic script navigating through the org. We also see that we had a pretty significant increase of both URI events and Lightning performance events late last week. Might make you wonder what happened here. Well, what happened is I talked to a prospect who was interested in this, and they said, does that include Lightning performance? And I said, yep, but I can't show that to you because my developer org doesn't use Lightning. So then I started playing with Lightning a little bit, installed some packages, changed the UI to the new Lightning UI, and that's what this is. I changed it back sometime on, I want to say, Monday night. Visualforce pages. Have you ever installed a third-party package and got complaints from your users that, hey, it's breaking on me, or it's terribly slow? Have you ever talked to the vendor of that third-party package and heard, no, it's running totally fine for our customers? Well, here's the proof, right? In my org, I only have really 3 Visualforce pages, but you can see how this works on a grand scale. No Visualforce pages are actually failing. Let's have a look into this one. So this is giving me the worst performing Visualforce pages by max runtime. Actually had one, and I hate to admit it, this is mine, where it was running for 1,800, is that seconds or milliseconds?
Milliseconds.
Ooh, 18 seconds is okay. I'm okay with that. But if you wonder what the difference is between this one and this widget, they look very much alike. Well, one is looking at the maximum time. The other one is looking at the average time. When we look at average, my Visualforce page is still slower than the rest, but not that bad, right? Apex execution by entry point, average runtime by time of the day. This I always find is a very interesting one, mainly because it seems like 3 o'clock in the morning, if you're on the same pod as I am, not a good time to run your scheduled Apex, right? It's somewhat significantly slower than even at 10 o'clock in the morning. Let's talk about some other things here. Let me go to a dashboard that I've labeled security, and it's not necessarily security. One thing that we can do here very easily is, you see I have a test org that I installed this into. There's hardly any traffic in that test org. Might want to filter this dashboard just on my main org. Whoops. Let's do this. I clicked on the main org. It's now filtering the entire dashboard just by that org. Have things here, report exports. Always an interesting one from a security point of view, right? Who's stealing our data? What are the client IPs that people are logging in from? In this case, I know because of where my synthetic users are coming from, those are valid client IPs, but you could see, are we having a spike from a specific client IP? Is somebody trying to hack our org? In some cases, we might want to leverage this to actually see, I have a user logged in from our office. I can see by the client IP, and I have another user with the same username logged in from China. Something might be wrong. We can filter by user, so this would add the user. We can see that user is who's exporting our reports, specific actions. And I'm going to show one last thing. In Salesforce, you have the request ID. So we could copy a request ID here and then very quickly run a query that says, show me everything for the SFDC login event where what was it? SFDC request ID equals, oops, did I not copy it? Equals this one. This is what happens when you demo off of a computer that's not yours. Equals this one, and let's say since 1 week ago, and then we see everything happen. In this case, it's only one event, but we see everything that happened related to this request ID. So if you have a Visualforce request that failed, or a Visualforce request that ran really slowly, we can take the request ID and see what on the back end, what Apex classes were triggered, what other events were triggered on the back end that made this slow. Okay, and that was the demo of Insights. With that, back to you, Amanda.
Thanks, Heiko. So I think that's a great example of how the integration can unlock the power of the data in event monitoring. And I really love the way in New Relic Insights, the way you can quickly build new dashboards just based off queries. I think that's really powerful. OK, so we've talked a lot about the event log files. And I think the thing about the event log files is that you're looking at events that have already happened. But there are, sorry, I just clicked the wrong link here. But what about if you want to know more about what's happening right now? Well, there are some aspects of the product today that are already real time. So we do have a feature. I didn't talk much about it today because there was a session on it yesterday, but there is a feature in event monitoring called transaction security. If you didn't catch that session, don't worry about it. There's a great trailhead on it. I recommend checking that out. But what this allows you to do is actually intercept events and enforce correct user behavior based on policies that the administrator defines. So I've listed some examples of the actions you can take here, but let me just give you an example. Say you want to prevent a user from doing a very large report export. Say you want to limit it and know if somebody's doing a report export for more than 100,000 rows. You can say, alert me if that happens, or you can ask, well, let's bump that user up to two-factor authentication and make sure they really are who they say they are. Or you can actually block them from even doing that. On the other side, we also, today in the API, we keep events for 30 days. And we only run the log files either daily or hourly if you're in the pilot. But we do have a few events that are available from our big object storage. And you may have seen sessions on that as well. And really, the goal here is to get to massive scalability and preserve the data for much longer. So there's a feature called Login Forensics, which is available already, generally available, and we have a pilot for Apex limits and an API event. So key differentiators here are the data is available near real time from a query and available for much longer. And because it's also much more scalable, we can store more information about those events as well. But where we're ultimately moving to is that we want to have a common event framework where you can stream events, subscribe to a channel, be able to write policies on those events, and be able to access them from big objects. So this is kind of our bigger strategic goal. It'll take us a while to get there. Obviously, in event log files, we have 41 events, so we're working towards gradually instrumenting these events and having them completely available in the real-time architecture. So just some follow-up actions for you guys. I really recommend the Trailhead modules. There's a Trailhead for event monitoring and one for transaction security. These were some of the first modules developed, and they're really well done. So if you really want to get a taste for the product, this is a great way to do it. And then if you want to get even more hands-on, then there's a few options here. So developer orgs do actually have event monitoring turned on with a subset with data for 1 day. So that's a good way of testing it out. Or if you want to test it out in your production org, you can ask whoever your account representative is to get you a courtesy license. If you want to try out New Relic Insights, the other product that we demoed today, generally speaking, you can go to the New Relic website to test that out. But specifically for the package, right now, because it's not an app exchange just yet, you need to contact Heiko for that. But we're working on that. And then I did mention a few pilot programs. So for those, you could either, again, reach out to your account representative or reach out to me directly, and I will be happy to advise you how to get into them. And that's it. So I think I only have 39 seconds for questions, but I will stick around. But if there's a couple of questions, I'll try to take them.